What camera has a 24 to 600mm equivalent lens, can shoot in burst at 24 frames per second, has a 1-inch sensor and can shoot 4K internally? Why, it's the Sony RX10 Mark IV, of course, and today I'm going to put it through its paces here at Richmond Park in London. Now this camera is a bridge camera, and for anyone who's not familiar with what a bridge camera is, it's basically a halfway house between your traditional compact camera and a DSLR. It's got a DSLR style form factor, it's got lots of controls and the options to shoot with all manual settings and shoot in RAW and things like that, but it's got that fixed lens like a compact and a smaller sensor than you may expect to see in your typical CSC or DSLR. So let's talk about the sensor in this camera a little bit. It's got a stacked 1-inch CMOS sensor that has a resolution of 20.1 megapixels. Now at 1 inch, it's smaller than the kind of sensors that you'll find in CSCs and DSLRs, but much bigger than those that you'll find in smartphones, compacts, and even most of our bridge cameras. Now, what's that going to mean for users? Now, you're not going to quite get the same dynamic range with the files of this camera that you would with a CSC or DSLR. So if you're shooting scenes where you've got really bright highlights and really dark shadows, you're perhaps going to lose a little bit of detail. However, compared to those smartphones and compacts, you're going to get much better image quality from this camera, particularly if light is less than perfect. With an ISO range of 100 to 12,800, you can expect great image quality from this device up to about ISO 3200 at a resolution that's easily large enough for home prints. Paired with a Bion ZX processor, the same processor that's found in the brand's flagship A9 CSC, some of the speeds of this device are pretty blistering. The camera has a crazy top burst shooting rate of 24 frames per second with full autofocus and auto exposure tracking. The device's buffer can cope with up to 249 frames when shooting fine quality JPEGs, or in our testing, it's been managing about 113 RAWs. Now, clearing that buffer to the device's single UHS 1 slot does take some time, which is slightly frustrating. However, in all fairness, if you've managed to fill it and still haven't got the shot that you're after, you were probably never going to get it anyway. That kind of burst rate certainly seems overkill for the images that we've been capturing today, so there are also 10 frames per second and 3 frames per second options available. The camera's mechanical shutter provides shooting speeds of between 30 seconds and 1/2000th of a second, while the electronic shutter has a top speed of 1/32,000th of a second. A truly silent shooting mode is also available. Now, if you're going to invest in a fixed lens device, you want to make sure that the optic that it has is suitable for the kinds of subjects that you want to capture. You're obviously not going to be able to switch it out like you could a CSC or DSLR lens. Thankfully, this optic on the RX10 Mark IV is really versatile. At its widest, it's 24mm full frame equivalent focal length, which is suitable for things like landscapes or group shots of friends. And at its longest, it's got a massive reach of 600mm as a full frame equivalent focal length. And that's great for things like wildlife or sports photography. That's a 25 times optical zoom. Now that focal range is operated using either the zoom switch placed around the shutter button or one of the 3 control rings on the lens. It's got an f2.8 to f4 variable aperture, which is relatively quick too. It's a shame it's not a constant f2.8, but for such a wide focal range, it's still pretty admirable. Sharpness and control of chromatic aberration and distortion with this lens are all very good too. It's not tack sharp in a way that prime lenses for DSLRs and CSCs are, but that's, really to be expected. For such a zoom, I've been pleasantly surprised with the images that I've taken on review. There's a focus range limiter on the barrel of the lens to speed up focusing, and it's got optical steady shot, which compensates for 4.5 stops of shake. Now that's a really useful feature to have at 600mm, where every camera shake movement is really going to be emphasised in your images. Now it's all very well having that massive focal range and claiming that a camera is well suited for sports and wildlife with it, but you really have to have an autofocus system that can back that up. And thankfully the RX10 Mark IV does. It's got a hybrid autofocus system, so it has 315 phase detection points and 25 contrast detect points, which cover 65% of the frame, and its algorithms are borrowed from the A9. Now in testing, this autofocus system has seemed pleasingly fast and accurate, and the tracking option in particular has really impressed me. It's certainly not struggled to keep up with the deer moving around today. Now in low light conditions, that autofocus speed does slow down a little bit, but it's still a really admirable performance for a bridge device, and certainly much quicker than the RX10 Mark III was. Now, one of the biggest advantages of this camera are its size and its weight. It's not exactly pocketable in the way that a traditional compact camera is, but when you consider that it's got a 600mm equivalent focal length and you compare it to 600mm lenses for DSLRs and CSCs, well, then it really is quite small. There'd be at least, 3, 4, perhaps even 5 times longer, and they certainly wouldn't weigh in at 1.1 kilograms like this thing does either. Now this camera also has some really interesting video options. It can do 4K at 30 frames per second with no pixel binning, or Full HD at 120 frames per second. Now the Sony RX10 Mark IV is a true enthusiast's bridge camera. It goes above and beyond in so many areas of its performance than what is capable with most of a bridge devices. If you're looking for something that can really perform but you can handhold and support, then this could be a great choice. Perhaps if you're looking to pack light for a safari and you've only got room for one camera and one lens, this could be a great choice that could lead to some excellent images. Or perhaps you're looking for something to take family photos of family members playing sports. Again, it could be a fantastic choice. There are other options. You could look at buying a super zoom lens and a kind of APS-C style DSLR, but the end package is going to be a lot bulkier and a lot heavier, and for many people that's not really going to be what they're looking for. So for more information about the RX10 Mark IV, visit wex.co.uk.